Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. The man with the sack, the Hartridge National Bank, was the kind of place that prided itself on order. A pristine glass facade, a perfectly timed water fountain out front, and a lobby that smelled like polished tile and expensive cologne. Everything had a rhythm. Morning deposits, lunch hour transactions, end-of-day tallies. The staff wore smiles the way mannequins wore suits. Well-fitted but lifeless. At exactly 10:14 a.m. that rhythm shattered. The front doors creaked open, not swung or pushed, but creaked like they were being forced against time itself. Heads turned, conversations trailed off. The guard nearest the entrance stepped forward, fingers curling toward the radio at his shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. The man who entered didn't belong there barefoot. His skin was sun-cracked and spotted like old paper left under the sun too long. His coat was long, grey, fraying at the edges, too heavy for a morning that was already nudging 80 degrees. His beard was wild, patchy, with streaks of white tangled like forgotten threads. But what held everyone's attention wasn't any of that. It was the burlap sack dragging behind him. It scraped across the floor with a sickening rasp, not loud, but intrusive, like the sound of something alive being pulled against its will. The sack was stained, dark marks along the bottom, a corner that looked burned, frayed ropes cinching the top. The receptionist rose from her desk, unsure if she should call security or call someone else entirely. "Sir, can I help you?" Response. The old man kept walking, not hurried, not aggressive, just ... deliberate, like he had walked into this exact bank 1,000 times in his head. And now, finally, he was walking it for real. One of the tellers, a young woman named Cassidy, leaned over to whisper, "What is he doing?" He stopped just outside the branch manager's office. The man inside, crisp blue suit, hair waxed into place, nameplate that read Eric Dalton, senior branch executive, was in the middle of a video call. He looked up, frowned, ... "Sir, this is a restricted area. I'll have to ask you to return to the lobby," Dalton said, tapping the mute button on his call. The old man didn't speak. He reached into the sack. 3 people stood up at once. The security guard unclipped his holster, hand hovering over his sidearm. The old man slowly pulled out a leather folder, old, cracked, with a knotted string holding it shut. No weapons, no sudden movement, just that same dragging, dreadful calm. He laid the folder on Dalton's glass desk. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low, not weak, but controlled, like he'd practiced the words for years. "This bank was stolen from me in 1967. Dalton blinked, scoffed. "Excuse me." The old man untied the string. His fingers were rough, nails chipped, knuckles thickened by time. He flipped the folder open. Inside were documents, some faded brown, others yellowed with age, legal-looking, handwritten notes, stamps, signatures. But it was the photograph that caught Dalton's eye, a black-and-white portrait of a young black man in a suit, grinning, hopeful. The resemblance was immediate. The same cheekbones, the same fierce eyes. It was him, decades younger. "I owned the land this bank was built on, filed the claim, secured the deeds, had a partner, trusted the wrong man." He didn't blink. It disappeared the same year. "Your bank opened its doors." Dalton tried to laugh it off. "Okay, this is some kind of hoax, a performance art thing." The security guard took another step closer, but the old man raised one palm slightly, still calm. "I'm not here for trouble. I'm here for the truth." Dalton sighed. "Sir, I'm calling the police." From across the lobby, a quiet voice spoke up. "Wait a second," said Cassidy, staring wide-eyed at the man, then at the photo. "Isn't that the guy from that story? The one about the land deal in the 60s? The disappearance?" Everyone turned to look at her. She was already typing on her phone. "My grandma told me about it. Some guy tried to start a black-owned bank in this town back in the civil rights era. He had documents, land, everything. And then ... poof, he vanished. People said it was a setup." Dalton scoffed. "Urban legend." But he looked pale now. The old man said nothing. He only reached into the sack again. Dalton's hand hovered over his phone. "If you take one more..." The second item hit the desk with a dull thud. A rusted keyring heavy with keys, dozens of them, each labeled with handwritten tags. One read, Vault A, Hartridge Trust, 1966. No one kept copies of these, the old man whispered, except me. Dalton's face was unreadable now, but his fingers trembled. You've got 5 minutes to prove this isn't a scam, he muttered, more to himself than to the room, because if this is real, you're about to append everything. The old man smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed locked. I waited 57 years. I can wait 5 more. And from the sack, he began to pull one final item. The entire room leaned forward, curiosity overwhelming fear now. Cassidy gasped, and someone at the back screamed. The name that disappeared. The object he pulled from the sack wasn't large, no bigger than a hardcover book. But the moment it hit the desk, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It was a ledger. Thick, leather-bound, edges worn nearly round from decades of use. There was a faint burn mark along the spine, and something that looked like dried wax sealing the back cover. Cassidy, who had stepped closer without realizing it, stared as the old man flipped it open. The pages were lined with handwritten entries, ink that had faded to a bluish gray. Column after column, names, dates, numbers, signatures, loan amounts, interest rates, deposits. Dalton leaned forward before he caught himself. Where did you get this? I didn't get it, the old man replied. I wrote it. He tapped one page, a yellowed entry dated April 4th, 1966. L. Grant and W. Banner. Initial deposit, $5,200. Purpose, founding capital, People's Unity Bank. I was W. Banner, he said, voice a notch lower now, charged with memory. My partner, Leonard Grant, was the accountant. We opened the People's Unity Bank to serve our own, back when other banks wouldn't give working-class black folks the time of day. We had over 70 accounts before the summer ended. Deposits from barbers, cooks, retired Pullman porters, widows. We had Community Trust, Cassidy whispered. I've heard of that name. Unity Bank. There was some scandal. Dalton stood, arms crossed. That bank failed. Poor management. Disappeared overnight. No, the old man said sharply, raising his head. It didn't fail. It was taken. He paused. The room was dead silent. They used a loophole, he continued. The land I bought. Turns out the man I trusted, Leonard, never filed the deed transfer under my name. He kept it under his. Claimed I'd signed a side agreement. A month later, the bank was shut down by city order. On paper, it looked like a loss. In reality, it was a setup. He flipped the page. Then came the fire. Night after the bank was shut. All our documents gone. No records left. Except this one, Dalton said slowly, nodding at the ledger. The old man's eyes glinted. I buried it. Cassidy's voice trembled now. But you vanished. People said you left town. That you stole the money. Dalton nodded eagerly, like a man grabbing onto a lifeline. That's right. That's the part you're leaving out. The rumors say you took the last deposits and disappeared. Rumors planted by the people who took my bank, the old man said, each word landing like a blow. I didn't leave town. I was beaten, thrown in a truck, and dumped 3 counties over with a warning carved into my back. He turned slightly, lifting the back of his coat. Gasped. A jagged scar ran from the top of his left shoulder blade down toward his spine. Ugly, twisted, real. I survived, but I knew I couldn't come back, not then, not without proof, and not while the men who did it still held power. He rested one hand on the ledger. So I disappeared, changed my name, worked under the table for decades, waiting for someone to dig up the story, or for one of them to slip. And now? Dalton asked, though his voice had lost its smugness. Why now? The old man looked at him, not with anger, but with something heavier, grief wrapped in steel. Because they're all dead now. Every man who was part of the theft, I've kept track. The last one passed this spring. He paused. And with him gone, I'm no longer hunted. I'm witness. Cassidy leaned over the desk, almost mesmerized. But this building, Hartridge Bank, it was built on the land where Unity Bank used to be. Yes, he said. 6 months after our fire. Different name, different owners, but the same foundation. Dalton's face twitched. That's impossible. There'd be a record. I brought the records, the old man said. He pulled another item from the sack. Blueprints, brittle and faded, stamped with Department of City Planning, 1965, and bearing William Banner's signature. I had copies made before the betrayal, kept them hidden all these years. The folder was growing thicker, the pile of evidence too heavy to ignore. Even the security guard had stopped hovering. Now he was watching, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, listening. Dalton turned, trying to reassert control. This is all interesting, but without legal action, without a lawyer. It's just old paper. There's no actually, a voice said from the back. Everyone turned. It was the woman from the notary desk, Ms. Jamila Ortiz, licensed paralegal and part-time real estate law student. She had been quietly listening, but now she stepped forward, holding her phone. "I just looked up those city plans," she said. "He's telling the truth. This property was originally zoned under Banner and Grant Holdings in '65. Ownership changed under sealed court order. That's very unusual." Dalton's face had gone pale. The old man looked at him, calm as ever. "I don't want revenge," he said, "but I want recognition. I want the record corrected. I want the name they erased put back on that land. The People's Unity Bank may be gone, but William Banner is not." And for the first time, he stood fully upright. No longer stooped, no longer a forgotten relic. He looked like a founder, like someone who had been waiting his whole life to stand here. Dalton sank into his chair, and Cassidy, barely able to breathe, asked quietly, "What are you going to do next?" The old man's eyes flicked to the side, his fingers brushed the edge of the ledger, and he said, with absolute clarity, "We rebuild." Proof in the ashes. William Banner stood tall now, the sag in his shoulders gone. Years had bowed him, yes, but they hadn't broken him, not where it counted. The bank lobby was no longer a bank lobby. It was a courtroom, a confession box, a history lesson unfolding one word at a time. No one moved, no one dared. Dalton cleared his throat and tried to reassert himself, but the words came dry and cracked. "This is dramatic, and you've clearly brought a lot of paper. But you must know that land deeds, oral testimony, none of that means anything without legal channels, and I doubt this crusade will hold up." William didn't flinch. Instead, he opened the next fold in the leather folder. This time, it wasn't a document. It was a letter, sealed in plastic to preserve it. Typed, water-stained, with a faded signature at the bottom. "James H. Drayton, City Clerk, Hartridge County." Cassidy leaned forward, reading aloud softly, "To whom it may concern, regarding the proposed sale of parcel for 8B, held under Banner and Grant Trust, I hereby confirm that the original deed bears the legal signature of William Banner, witnessed and certified by the county office. Dated March 22, 1966. Her voice faltered as she reached the bottom. "And any future claims contesting Mr. Banner's ownership are to be considered fraudulent unless overturned by court appeal." Dalton's jaw tensed. Drayton was disbarred, he snapped, for something else. In 1981, William replied, long after he signed this. "Still," Dalton said, "all this, it's a show, a performance. You're telling a powerful story, but this is not how property disputes are settled." William finally looked him in the eye. "You're right," he said, "which is why I filed the paperwork 3 weeks ago." Dalton blinked. "What?" William reached into the folder one final time and pulled out a packet, fresh, clean, stamped. Cassidy recognized the emblem. "County Courthouse, Civil Claim Division. I filed a legal motion to challenge the chain of title for this land. It names the original transfer in 1967 as fraudulent and asks the court to reinstate the last uncontested deed, mine." Dalton's face drained. "You mean this is real? This is actually happening?" William nodded. "The hearing is next Friday." "You're suing Hartridge Bank?" Dalton asked. "No," William said, quiet but firm. "I'm suing for my name, for the truth. And if Hartridge Bank wants to keep its walls standing, it will have to prove it didn't bury me in its foundation." Dalton stood, suddenly flushed. "You'd think the court will just hand over the property, that a 70-something-year-old man can waltz in and rewrite history." William didn't answer. He turned instead to the others, the teller, the notary, even the guard. Not with anger, but with something more dangerous, belief. "There are still people alive who remember Unity Bank. I've spoken to them. A few will testify. Some of them have their old deposit slips. One woman had her father's framed on the wall." He paused. Why would someone frame a deposit slip from a bank that was supposedly a fraud? No one answered. "Because it meant something," he continued. "It was proof that we could build something, that we didn't have to wait for someone else to lend us permission. And they took that from us, not just the money, but the belief." The guard, silent until now, cleared his throat. "Mr. Banner." William looked at him. "I just want to say, My grandfather told me stories about a bank run by black folks. He said he thought it was a lie, a myth, but he used to wish it was real. William smiled gently. It was. The guard gave a slow, quiet nod. Cassidy leaned on the desk now, barely blinking. Why now? Why wait 57 years? William inhaled, and this time, he let his voice tremble just a little. Because I buried too many friends with that ledger, still hidden. Because I watched the world move on while I stayed stuck in 1967, waiting for justice to catch up. I thought I had time, but I don't, not anymore. His eyes locked on Dalton one last time, and because I won't die with this story still stolen. Dalton, now visibly sweating, moved behind his desk, like a man bracing for an earthquake. You won't win, he muttered. You're a ghost, Mr. Banner, and ghosts don't get justice. William took a single step forward. Sometimes they do, he said, if they scream loud enough, and then he reached back into the sack, the final item, wrapped in faded velvet. He unrolled it on the desk, a metal plaque, charred, scratched. Still legible, it read, People's Unity Bank, EST, 1966, built by the people, for the people. Cassidy's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. William traced a finger across the scorched metal. They tore it off before the fire. I found it buried in the dirt beside the old foundation when I returned 2 years ago. Like they didn't want anyone to ever know we were here. Now he held it up for all to see, not just a relic, but a witness. Dalton sank into his chair. And the room stood still. No noise, no denial, only awe, because William Banner wasn't a myth anymore. He was a man, and he had come back with receipts. The town that forgot by Monday morning. The town of Hartridge had a secret no longer. It started with a whisper on local social media, a blurry photo posted by Jamila Ortiz, the notary who had witnessed William Banner's confrontation, showing the charred metal plaque lying across Dalton Hartridge. S. mahogany desk. No caption, just 3 words. He came back. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. By noon, the local paper ran a headline on its site. Mysterious elder claims ownership of historic bank property. By sunset, Channel 4 News had the story on the 6 o'clock report. They showed shots of the worn leather ledger, of the plaque, and even a short interview with Cassidy Monroe, whose tearful voice cracked as she said, he wasn't just telling a story, he brought the truth with him. And by Tuesday morning, people were lined up outside Hartridge Bank, not to riot, not to protest, but to see the man who had walked in from the shadows of time, carrying proof no one expected to see. If the rumors were real, William Banner didn't hide. He returned that day, not in rags, but in a crisp brown suit, his back straight, his scarred hands steady. He didn't carry the sack this time, just a file folder and the plaque. He wore no expression of anger, no bitterness, only calm. Cassidy met him at the steps. You've become a legend overnight, she said softly. I've been one in my head for 50 years, he replied, offering a faint smile. Now it's everyone else's turn. Dalton didn't come out to greet him. In fact, he hadn't been seen since Sunday. The bank issued a vague press statement that morning claiming it was reviewing the matter with legal counsel, but it did little to calm the rising curiosity, especially not after a second surprise dropped. A copy of the original 1966 deed, notarized and signed, was emailed to the courthouse from a private account marked only W.Grant.family. The accompanying note read, My father kept this hidden. I think it belongs to the truth now. Cassidy gasped when she saw it. Leonard Grant's son, she whispered. He must have had a copy all these years. William only nodded. Maybe guilt skips a generation. By Thursday, the media had arrived in force, local, state, even a few national reporters with cameras rolling, microphones, waving, but William didn't crave the spotlight. He gave one short interview, standing beneath the old bank's brick arch. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to correct the page that history tore out. I didn't lose my name. It was taken, and now I've come to take it back with peace, but not with silence. Across town, the city council called an emergency meeting. Mayor Anissa Kemp, a sharp, seasoned woman who had once campaigned on transparency, but found herself trapped in old alliances, watched the news with gritted teeth. The optics were bad, very bad, especially since Hartridge Bank had contributed to her last 2 campaigns. Her assistant leaned in. Ma'am, what should we say? She sighed. We say we're investigating. We say we're neutral, and quietly, we start checking which lawyers represented the 1967 property transfer. Behind closed doors, panic brewed. Because if William Banner's claim stood, if the land was rightfully his, everything built on it since could fall under legal challenge. Office leases, property taxes, insurance liabilities. One misplaced deed could unravel 50 years of banking legitimacy. On Friday morning, outside the courthouse steps where the title claim hearing was set to begin, a crowd had gathered. Some came for history, some for justice, some just for spectacle. Among them was Ava Miller, a retired schoolteacher, 84 years old, and nearly blind. She stood holding a weathered envelope, clutching Cassidy's arm for balance. I taught civics in 1967, she told the news crews. I remember when the People's Unity Bank opened. I opened an account for $12. Still have the slip. The cameras zoomed in as she pulled it from her coat pocket. A tiny yellow rectangle, crinkled and smudged, but unmistakable. Her voice cracked. I thought it was gone. But he's back. He's back, and he brought us with him. Inside the courthouse, William stood alone at the petitioner's table. No attorney, no team, just the plaque, the ledger, the deed. The judge, an aging but sharp-eyed woman named Marcia Tulliver, raised her brow. Mr. Banner, you're representing yourself. Yes, Your Honor. You understand the gravity of this motion. I understand that the truth waited long enough. She regarded him for a long moment. Then present your case. And for the next 45 minutes, William Banner didn't raise his voice. He didn't weep. He didn't rage. He simply told the story. The paper trail, the betrayal, the fire, the scar, the silence, the loss of a name, not just his, but a community's. And when he was done, the courtroom didn't applaud. They stood. The judge did not rule that day. She said she would take the case under review, but outside, as the sun set over the old brick walls of Hartridge Bank, someone had already spray-painted something along the sidewalk in big white letters. Welcome, BACK, Mr. Banner. Buried voices, rising storm. 3 days passed. The courthouse had gone silent. William Banner returned each morning to the same bench outside Judge Tulliver's chambers, dressed in that same brown suit. No updates, no rulings, only the ticking of the clock and the deepening shadows of resistance. Across town, the Hartridge Bank building stood under strange tension, like a bomb no one wanted to admit was armed. Inside, the staff whispered. The guard, now quietly respectful toward William, had been replaced by a stone-faced security team in dark suits. Dalton Hartridge hadn't been seen in over a week. The board had gone into full damage control mode, hiring a fleet of lawyers. From out of state, Cassidy, who once rolled her eyes at older customers with long stories, now found herself checking the news every hour, heart pounding with each headline. And the headlines were relentless. Forgotten bank, stolen legacy, land ownership laws face landmark challenge in Hartridge. A man returns to reclaim more than land. But with attention came pushback. On Tuesday night, someone threw a brick through the window of a community center where William had spoken the evening before, spray-painted across the wall in red. Lies don't deserve land. The police called it random vandalism. Cassidy knew better. William didn't flinch. They're scared, he said to her quietly, when she showed up outside his small motel room with a bag of food and concern in her eyes. Scared people break things when they run out of ways to hide. But something else was starting to fray, not just the community, but William himself. That night, as rain hit the motel window, like fingers tapping a warning, he sat in the worn chair by the bed, staring at a faded photograph in his hands. The edges were bent, the colors washed with time. It was a photo of the People's Unity Bank before the fire. A group of men and women in Sunday clothes stood smiling in front of it. Their bank. William, young and proud, stood front and center, holding a ribbon and scissors. Most of them were gone now. All of them believed, he murmured. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the silence swallowed him. The next morning, Cassidy found him, waiting at the courthouse again. You don't look well, she said. He nodded slowly. Didn't sleep. Ghosts kept me up. Before she could ask more, Judge Tulliver's clerk opened the chamber door. The judge will see Mr. Banner in private. William stood. Cassidy grabbed his hand. Whatever happens in there, we're still with you. He smiled, faint, grateful, tired. Inside the judge's chambers, the air felt heavier. Judge Tolliver sat alone at her desk, no robe, sleeves rolled up, eyes lined with exhaustion. "Mr. Banner," she said, "have a seat." He did. "I've reviewed your case thoroughly," she said, tapping the stack of papers before her. The ledger, the plaque, the notarized deed, the witness statements, the building's ownership chain, and the lack of clear transfer documentation in 1967. It paints a troubling picture. William leaned in slightly. "But," she continued, "I've also received a lot of pressure from very high places. Phone calls, warnings about destabilizing the local economy, threats of bank collapse, lawsuits, even attempts to discredit you." William stayed quiet, not surprised. She looked at him. "You know what they're afraid of." He met her eyes. "That if I win, others might start digging." She nodded slowly. "Truth is, they buried a dozen of you. Not just here, all over the country. And now one of you came back with a shovel." Silence fell between them. Finally she said, "This should go to trial, but I'm not sure you'll make it through a drawn-out legal battle. They'll bury you again, with court fees, delays, smears, or worse." William exhaled. "Then what are you saying?" She picked up a small, sealed envelope and slid it across the desk. "I'm giving you the only door they haven't boarded shut." He opened it. Inside was a draft order, a proposed settlement hearing, a chance to resolve the case through a mediated public negotiation, with terms he could accept or reject. It wouldn't give him everything, not the full property title, but it could include a memorial and historical marker at the original Unity Bank, cite a public acknowledgement of wrongful transfer, a community fund named after Banner and Grant, and, possibly, shared partial ownership of the building going forward. Stared at the paper for a long time. "This isn't justice," he said, voice low. "No," Judge Tolliver replied, "but it's survival, and the beginning of something more." He looked at her, truly looked, and saw no malice, only truth. Only the compromise of a woman who'd lived long enough to know the system didn't always reward truth quickly. He stood. "I'll think about it." She nodded. "You have until Friday." As he left her office, the weight of 57 years sat on his shoulders. Outside, the sky was bruised with coming rain, but across the street, children played in front of the mural being painted on the side of the community center, a new project funded by public donation. After the vandalism, it showed a young man in a suit, ribbon in hand, standing before a building with a sign, "People's Unity Bank." Cassidy walked over to him as he watched. "They're painting you," she said. He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "If I sign that paper, will they think I gave up?" Cassidy shook her head. "They'll think you broke the silence, that you made noise loud enough they had to listen. You didn't come to win a building, William. You came to remind them who built it." And for the first time since he returned, his eyes shimmered. The name we remember Friday arrived with gray skies, heavy and low, like the breath before a storm. By 8 a.m., the courthouse steps were full. Reporters lined up behind barricades. Locals stood shoulder to shoulder with visitors from out of town. Children held cardboard signs with slogans they didn't fully understand but believed in anyway. One read, "You can't erase the truth." Another, "William built this." Inside the courthouse, the hearing room buzzed with tension. On one side sat the Hartridge Bank legal team, 6 strong, suits pressed, papers stacked. At their center, Dalton Hartridge had returned, puffy-eyed, grim. The man who once waved off William with laughter now wore a mask of tight restraint. On the other side sat William Banner, alone, once again in that worn brown suit, the plaque resting beside him. But this time, he wasn't truly alone. Cassidy sat behind him. So did Ava Miller, the retired school teacher, Jamila Ortiz, the notary, young people from the town, elders who remembered, and behind them, a room packed with history, waiting to be rewritten. Judge Tolliver entered, robe sweeping behind her, eyes solemn. "We are here to consider resolution in the matter of William Banner versus Hartridge Bank, concerning the disputed ownership of land originally held by the People's Unity Bank, founded in 1966. She glanced at both parties. "I understand there has been an offer. Mr. Banner, do you wish to respond?" William stood. And for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "I do," he said. "But first, I'd like to speak, just once, for the record." Judge Tolliver nodded. He stepped forward, his voice steady but carrying the weight of decades. "When I was 24 years old, I opened a bank with 10 other black men and women who wanted a place we could trust. We had been turned away from every other bank in town, so we built our own. He paused. The silence was thick, listening. It wasn't just a building. It was a message that we didn't have to ask permission to dream, that we didn't need to beg for dignity, that we could stand on our own. His fingers touched the old brass plaque, but the dream got stolen. With fire, with silence, with names erased from deeds and ledgers, with a lie so clean it passed for truth for 57 years. He looked across the aisle right at Dalton. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back so no child in this town would ever walk past that building and not know who built it. Dalton stared, stone-faced, but something flickered in his eyes, something small and cracked. William turned to the judge. I have read the offer. It is generous, but incomplete. A murmur rippled through the room. I accept the memorial, the historical marker, the education fund, but I cannot accept only that. He raised the plaque in both hands. This building stands on stolen ground, and if it continues to stand, it must bear a name, my name, the name of the people who built it. Judge Tolliver narrowed her eyes. Mr. Banner, are you requesting a naming condition? Yes, William said. I will settle on one term, that the building moving forward be renamed the Banner and Grant Trust Building. Gasps rose from the benches. Judge Tolliver leaned back, hands steepled. You want them to rename the bank building? No, William said. They can keep their bank. I'm asking them to rename the building it sits in, the structure, the stone, so the lie doesn't last another 50 years. The Hartridge lawyers began to shuffle, whispering furiously. Dalton stood. I won't, he began, then caught himself. His voice dropped, more quiet than defiant. My father gave me that bank. His father gave it to him. That name is not yours, William interrupted. Calm, direct. It never was. You inherited a theft. I'm offering you the dignity of returning it with grace. Silence returned like thunder withheld. Finally, Judge Tolliver spoke. Mr. Hartridge, do you wish to respond? Dalton's jaw clenched. His fingers twitched at the table's edge. Then slowly, bitterly, he sat. No objection, he muttered. Judge Tolliver nodded. Let the record show the settlement has been amended and accepted. The Banner and Grant Trust Building designation will be entered into the town ledger and applied within 60 days. The community fund, the memorial, and public statement of wrongful transfer will follow. She struck her gavel once. It is done. A beat of silence. Then a wave of cheers rose, not wild, not riotous, but deep, like the exhale of a truth long buried. Cassidy wept openly. Ava clapped twice, then simply bowed her head in prayer. One of the children held up a sign. He made them remember. William sat back down, eyes glassy, hands trembling slightly on his lap. Cassidy leaned forward. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We did it. Outside the courthouse, the clouds broke at last. Not sun, not yet, but light enough to scatter the gloom. As William exited the building, the mural at the community center stood tall in the distance, and beneath it, someone had painted a fresh line of words, where they buried him. He planted roots. The end.